Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how better scheduling can impact employee engagement and experience. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a really interesting topic, and I hope you enjoy our webinar. So first off, let me just introduce myself. My name is Mairead and I head up Softworks Marketing and Communications Department. Employee engagement is literally a subject that fascinates me. You will hear my passion throughout this webinar. I absolutely love learning about it. I love talking about it. I love writing about it. I've written a number of articles and papers on this subject area. I just find it so interesting. So I'm really looking forward to sharing all that I've learned to date around employee engagement and experience, and how that links into scheduling, how you can improve scheduling, how better scheduling can improve employee engagement and experience. So I'm just going to pass you over to Killian O'Mahony, who's with me here today. He's our head of global sales and partnerships. He'll introduce himself and do a very brief introduction to what Softworks do, and then we're going to get straight into the agenda and kick off. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mairead, and lovely to speak with everyone today. I can see some familiar names already jumping in who I've got to work with. So I spent about 10 years or so working with Softworks, and I know Mairead's going to go through a lot of the detail of this kind of presentation and webinar. It's a really interesting topic, and as Mairead's touched on, it's one she's really passionate about. Where I'm kind of lucky is I get to see firsthand, I get to work with a lot of our clients firsthand, and how I suppose Softworks can help and how our solution has helped. So for the purpose of today, I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to Softworks, just so you're aware of kind of who we are, a little bit about us, and then I'm going to pass it over to Mairead, who's going to run through a lot of the detail here for today. So I suppose just a little bit of background for anyone who's not familiar with Softworks. We were established in 1990. We were originally an Irish company, as you'll tell by my Irish accent. In that time, when we started, we were very much focused on kind of reporting and time management tools. But over the years, our solution has really grown. So we very much position ourselves now as a complete workforce management system that covers things like scheduling, time management, vacation, holiday management, HRIS management, skills and training management. So a topic like this is really interesting because it's one that really affects us on a day-to-day basis. From a background on Softworks, we take obviously certifications very seriously. We are ISO 27001 certified, and everything to do with employees is really important to us for things like GDPR compliance and kind of global compliance across storing data in the system. We've been very fortunate that we've grown all throughout the world at this stage. We're a pretty global company. So our head office is the Irish one, but we have offices now in the UK, in Germany, in Italy, in Canada, in the US. So really expanded globally at this point. And where I'm lucky on that is I get to work with all these different partners throughout different countries and see the kind of challenges they have around employee engagement and seeing how they best focus them. We do work with partners in all industries. So we've been very lucky that we've built up a fantastic customer base, and there's some really great customers I'll just touch on here. And I think the system wise, when Mairead covers a lot of this detail, I'll kind of talk about the system and how it's set up to be able to help. But it's been very much led by our clients, our partners, people we work with. So to date, we have over 800 happy customers who are using the system in different ways. And this challenge of employee engagement is one that they really focus on and is a real driver for Softworks. So it's why we get to be so hands-on in this space. And I think I'll pass it over to Mairead for the agenda.
Great, thanks for that, Killian. Okay, so we've got a great agenda ahead, really interesting. So first off, we're going to look at the importance of employee engagement and experience. Then I'm going to talk a wee bit about the levels of employee engagement, then how employee engagement affects your organization, whether that's positively or negatively, depending on how engaged your employees are. We're going to look at global employee engagement, so you can see where as a country, how engagement is in your country and in other countries, and how that is affecting organizations. Then how scheduling affects employees, whether it affects them positively in terms of engagement or negatively, depending on how that scheduling process works. And we're going to look at ways to improve schedule planning and processes, which will in turn help with your employee engagement. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how scheduling technology can assist with employee engagement. So, you know, it's great to have all the processes and procedures in place and have them all written out, but how do you actually implement that across your organization? And then we're going to leave some time at the end for some questions and feedback. So during the webinar, if you have any questions that you want to put forward, just pop them in the Q&A button there on Zoom, and we'll deal with as many as we can at the end of the webinar. And if for any reason we don't get to answer your question, we will follow up with you individually afterwards. So let's kick off. Now, okay, first of all, I need to set the scene. So before you can embark on employee engagement, you need to understand employee experience. So employee experience is from the first time that an employee interacts with your company. So let's say they apply for a job to work in your organization, and then they get the job, they go through the recruitment process, then they're onboarded right through to working within the company. So all of their experience within the company. That is where employee experience comes in. And employees need to have a good experience in order for them to be engaged with your company. So the experience is everything from relationships with their managers and colleagues, to their work themselves, their accomplishments, their goals, to the tools and technology that you provide them to do their job. If they don't have the right tools to do their job, they won't be able to be successful in their job. So the employee experience is what sets the stage for employee engagement. So let me just differentiate that, I suppose, from employee engagement. And the only reason I'm doing this is, as I know there's lots of experts here in the audience who will know this already, but it's really just to separate, because sometimes people bandy around engagement, experience, and satisfaction as if they're all the same thing, and they're absolutely not the same thing. So when we look at employee engagement, we're looking at a much more emotional commitment. So this is about a personal, emotional, and mental investment in your organization. So, you know, their goals are aligned with the goals of the organization, because they believe in the organization, they believe in the values, they believe in the goals, and they believe that they are a part of that journey, and they are so engaged that they want it to be successful. Their success is the organization's success, and vice versa. So it's very much a personal investment and an emotional connection, employee engagement. So, you know, and as I say, it starts with the experience in order to follow in through. So again, it's the level of commitment, it's how much they care about your organization. Engaged employees will take pride in their work achievements because look, they see themselves as part of a team. So they want to be successful for you. They're enthusiastic, they're driven, they're highly motivated people. And ultimately, their number one objective is to contribute to the organization's success, because as I say, they find meaning and motivation in their work and your organization. They understand the goals and they're committed to helping you achieve those goals, and that keeps their satisfaction levels. And I'm just going to go in where engagement versus experience. So as I say, a good overall experience. So from day one, when they deal with your company, that will set the stage to find employee engagement. The experience is the input. So that is what you as an organization put into your employees. And what you're hoping for is that they will get engagement at the end. They will be engaged because they've had an extremely good input from you. So as I say, the experience is your input, the outcome is your engagement, and that's your ultimate goal. The end goal is to have engaged employees. And as we go through this webinar, you will see why. They make a huge difference to organization success or otherwise. Okay, and again, just to go into what satisfaction is, and the reason as well is that you can have a very satisfied employees, but that does not mean they're engaged. So while engaged employees do need to be satisfied, absolutely, satisfied employees are not necessarily engaged. So I suppose what that means is that employee satisfaction could probably be more described as a one-way street. So you go in there, you do the job, you go home, okay, you're happy, you know what I mean? You clock your hours, you get paid, you leave again, but you don't necessarily, you know, push yourself any further than that. You may not really be that interested in the goals or the vision or the reason for the company existing or the organization. Whereas employee engagement is different. It's more two-way street, and your workers are committed to helping their companies to achieve all of their goals. They're, as I say, they're part of that squad, that club, that team. And that's the difference between being satisfied and being engaged. Okay, so we can see there, for engagement, it does require satisfaction, but it also requires motivation from employees and effectiveness, the ability for them to be effective in their role. There are three different levels of employee engagement. There are those who are actively engaged, and they're the ones that you absolutely want. There's those that are not engaged, and then there's those that are actively disengaged. The actively disengaged people are the destructive people. So really you're aiming for the actively engaged. The not engaged won't make all that much of a difference, but the actively disengaged can cause havoc. Let's look at their traits a little bit more. Actively engaged. So these are the people that are heavily invested in your company. They work with passion. They have a profound connection with the company. They're the ones that are in meetings offering creative ideas. They're not afraid to offer ideas. They see that as being a way of helping drive the company towards its goals. They'll take on initiative. They'll put their hand up and say, yeah, I can do that, because they want to be part of it, and they understand the company's vision, and they support them with their creative ideas, and taking on extra initiatives. They show pride in their company. They go tell their family and friends, I work for Softworks, it's a great company, I really enjoy my job, we've got some really cool stuff going on. So they're very vocal about the companies that they work for. They're the ones that will drive innovation. You need people like that in your company, and certainly in a technology company like ourselves, we need innovative people. So we would be very, very concentrated on employee engagement and making sure our employees are engaged. They're resilient, so they understand there's ups and downs, as there is in all parts of life, but change doesn't scare them. Change in some ways could even excite them, because it's another opportunity to try something else. And throughout their employment with you, they will maintain a positive outlook. As long as they're engaged, they will be positive as part of an employee with you. Let's look at the not engaged. They're a different kettle of fish. They're emotionally disconnected. They perform the bare minimum. And lucky enough, I don't have any in my team, but if I did, I would call them coasters. They just come in, they do the bare minimum. They're essentially checked out. They're you could nearly call them sleepwalking. And they don't bother making any recommendations, because to be honest, they don't really care. They don't like change, because change, that might mean they'll have to do some extra work or do something different or take on something that are afraid. They won't go out of their comfort zone for you at all. And as I say, they don't particularly care about the organization's goals or objectives. And then we're now on to the third level. Well, this is the worst. These people are dissatisfied at work, and they make it very obvious that they don't want to work. And the problem is they act out that unhappiness, and that's awful for their co-workers. They can sabotage the efforts that other people put in, and they'll blame performance on a lack of resources. Oh, I didn't have the right tools, or I couldn't do it. They'll never look at themselves. It'll always be something else that stopped them from doing a good job. And they'll be outspoken about company issues. They may spread damaging information or about your company. They'll talk the company down, any opportunity they can get. And they're absolutely not team players. And the worst thing about them, I suppose, and that's why I said at the beginning, is that they're destructive, is they can undermine what engaged workers achieve. So that's why they are really where you don't want to be. Okay. So let's look at the key requirements for employee engagement. So employee engagement, it's not a one thing, it's a whole combination. As I say, starting off with the employee experience. So the employee experience will set the stage for your employee engagement. Then if you want your employees to be engaged, you need to communicate very clearly with them. They're not going to understand the vision of the company if you don't communicate that. And you can't just say this is the vision or this is the culture or these are the goals. You got to show that. So that has to be part of it. So communicating properly with them. They want a reasonable workload. There's no point in absolutely having somebody with a workload that they're never going to achieve, because they won't get past step one if you do that to them. They want to be treated fairly. Who doesn't want to be treated fairly? So that's one of the things that will always come up when people are unhappy at work, is because they feel like they're not being treated fairly. They need to be motivated. Obviously, we all have a certain amount of motivation ourselves, but we still need to be motivated by our managers or people that we work with. They need to have clear goals. Again, it's not fair to expect somebody to achieve something if they don't really know what their goals are in the first place. More and more, they want a work-life balance. We all want a work-life balance. They don't want to be stressed out, and that passes back into the workload, that they have a reasonable workload. And they also want recognition, particularly the younger workers, who are often referred to as the trophy generation, where you got a medal just for showing up. I've got 2 teenagers, we've hundreds of medals in our house. They don't bat an eyelid. I won a medal in the under-16s hockey for Dublin, and that was my pride medal, my only medal, I must add. I think I got one for art as well. That was about it. But it's a different generation. They're very used to being recognised and praised for their work, and they deserve it. Why not? So all of these are required if you want your employees to be engaged. Okay, why are the benefits? Why would you bother doing it? Well, first of all, it increases productivity and efficiency for your organization. It'll lower turnover and increase retention, because like I say, I would always look at it, I suppose, being a member of a club or a team. You're not going to leave that team if you're invested in it. So whether you're, hoping to win the FA Cup, or you're hoping to win the Six Nations that Ireland won, I just have to put that in there. Whatever it is, you're not going to jump ship. You don't jump from place to place unless you don't feel like you're making a difference, or that your company listened to you, or whatever it is. You won't jump ship because you're engaged. It reduces absenteeism. You're not going to pull a sickie just because you couldn't be bothered going to work, because if you miss that day or you're not working, then you're further away from your goals. You're not doing what you need to be doing. Enhances customer service and experience. Look, we've all walked into that shop or the restaurant whereby, there's nobody interested. They're just filing their nails, or you're on the phone, you're trying to get some information and that they're not engaged. So engaged people will give great customer service and experience. It increases profitability as well. And I have actually numbers, I suppose, to go with that. And it strengthens your reputation. Look back on, the people that are engaged, that are going around saying, oh, I love working for Softworks, la, 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 versus the actively disengaged, or saying, oh, that's an awful place to work. You don't want to be there. So ultimately, engaged employees, they're at the heart of every successful business. So look, it pays to have engaged workers. So Gallup have done a number of studies that I will refer to during this webinar. And what they looked at was the organizations that were in the top tier of employee engagement. So these ones had the highest percentage of engaged employees. And they discovered that they were 17% more productive. They were 21% more profitable. They had 41% lower absenteeism rates, 20% higher sales, and 24% lower turnover. They are real figures. And, in a time where it's very, very hard to compete, when a lot of products and services can all look the same. They're not the same, but they can all look the same. You need to find ways, and employee engagement offers a huge opportunity for organizations in so many different areas. I know not everything is about profit, but just in terms even of absenteeism, of not having to constantly recruit new people, etc. There's so many different advantages. So I suppose, to sum up how engagement affects organizations, it affects them in a number of ways. And if you're successful at mastering it, and I'm not in any way suggesting it's easy to master, it's not easy to master, but if you are successful, you will be more successful retaining employees, increasing productivity, reducing absenteeism, and boosting overall performance and profitability. It is really, really important. Okay, now let's look at how engaged employees actually are. We've had a good conversation there about the importance of it and the benefits of it. So let's see how we're actually doing. Well, apparently we work approximately 81,396 working hours that we work in our lifetime. The only thing we do more than that is sleep. So how's it going for us? Are we happy? Well, according to Gallup, 60% of people working are actually emotionally detached, and 19% are downright miserable. So that's not really great, all of those hours. And low engagement alone, if we want to put it in dollars, costs the global economy $7.8 trillion. So I'll just delve in a little bit more. Actually, before I do that, this guy gave me a bit of a laugh. Oh, you hate your job? Why didn't you say so? There's a support group for that. It's called Everybody, and they meet at the bar. Drew Carey came up with that gag. And it's not quite everybody, but let me just bring it down to more of the countrywide where it is. So globally, only 21% of employees are engaged at work. So that means that 79% are not engaged. So they're not great figures. However, looking at the bright side, it does give an opportunity there. In Europe, we're not doing so great. We've only 14% of employees are engaged at work. So I've just thrown up a few of the countries. They're just countries that we happen to have offices in. I was just kind of curious on it. Germany is at 16%. Ireland, where we're based, is 11%. The UK and Spain are both in at 9%. France is only 6% and Italy is only 4%, which actually really surprised me because we're very lucky. We have an absolutely fabulous Italian team. Absolutely love working with them. So look, maybe it depends across industries and stuff, but these are the figures that Gallup have given us to work with from the 2022. And then obviously, because there's people here today from all regions around the world, I just throw up that one where you can see how you're doing in terms of your region. Unfortunately, in Europe here, we're the lowest at 14%. And up the top there, we can look at the United States and Canada, who are at 33%. And then you have everybody in between. So just looking at the United States and Canada, well, they're very interesting because they are the best region in the world at the moment to be an employee. And they're number one, as I just mentioned, for employee engagement. They're at 33%. They're also number one for job opportunities, and they're number two for well-being and living comfortably, just behind Australia and New Zealand, who came out number one in those areas, but didn't actually score as highly in engagement. So not a bad place to be working. And then I just want to talk briefly about a new phenomenon that kind of came up in early 2020s. The quiet quitters phenomenon came up, and it was driven largely by social media. And it's not actually people quitting, but it's more like them checking out. So it refers to employees who put no more effort into their jobs than are absolutely necessary. The content creators can put a TikTok video up that at the moment has had 3.6 million views, and then the hashtag quiet quitting is trending at millions and millions more of that. But basically, he talked about it's about work is not your life. So in this video, he talks about no longer is subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life. The reality is it's not, and your worth as a person is not defined by your productive output. So look, it's a bit of nearly a rebellion against work. I would probably best describe it. So, but it has, the positive, I suppose, on it has opened more discussions on employee well-being, employees getting burnt out, and having a good work-life balance. According to Gallup, 50% of the workforce, so I was quite excited about the US when I saw they were 33% engaged, but 50% of them are quiet quitters. And then that percentage, once again, I'll go back to the younger workers, it's particularly high among workers under the age of 35. So, we definitely need to be coming up with strategies for younger workers. And the other thing that has increased in Gallup's reports are disengaged workers. So that was 13% back in 2019, but that's actually gone up to 18% now in 2022. So that's 5 percentage points. So it's quite a high jump. I would like to look at this again though in 2025, because I do wonder if the pandemic has obviously, but I don't wonder it. I'm sure it has had an effect on that, on engagement. So it will be interesting. So maybe I'll come back and do that webinar in a few years' time, and we'll see where we are. According to the Harvard Business Review, their studies, it says it's not bad employees that are the problem, it's bad bosses. They're causing quiet quitters. So that's something for anyone who manages staff to take on board. And the managers who ranked highest were the ones that were able to allow employees to balance their needs with the business needs. And 62% of those employees were willing to go the extra mile, whereas only 3% came in the quiet quitting category. So look, it's very interesting, and there's improvement to be there. And then Gallup, looked at what makes a bad job, and the number one thing that makes a bad job was unfair treatment at work. So look, it's common sense, isn't it? We all want to be treated fairly. Then followed by unmanageable workload, unclear communication from managers, lack of support, and unreasonable time pressures. When we're looking at these, they're pretty much the same as what we were talking about, the requirements for employee engagement. So if you want your employees to be engaged, you need to look at all of these areas. So let's now move into the scheduling side of things. So, we're talking today about how better scheduling can improve employee engagement and experience. So the Harvard Business Review reviewed 153 academic articles that were examining non-standard scheduling and seeing how that affects employees. Now, I'm very conscious that, you know, it's all very well for a company like Softworks. We have flexi time and we offer all sorts of flexible working. I even get to take my summers off, you know, so we have all sorts of wonderful opportunities for our employees, but we're not working in the emergency services. I mean, obviously we have an extremely, you know, important service, but I understand, you know, the people here today who are from hospitals and other areas whereby it's not as simple as that you can just offer everybody flexi time. You know, shifts have to be covered. So I'm bearing obviously all of that in mind, but they did come up with, you know, rotational night shifts will, you know, people that have those shifts or have higher absenteeism, lower productivity, and it can have a negative effect on their well-being. And again, look, it's not surprising, you know, you're working nights, it's very much hard to sleep during the day, you're possibly not eating at the right times, you're possibly not able to exercise at the same times if places are closed. Whereas you compare that, for example, to people that have flex time, and then that's increased job satisfaction, reduced absenteeism, because, you know, obviously you can manage your home life much easier that way. You won't have people calling in sick because maybe their child is ill, because they can actually just get time to organize alternative arrangements, and they'll have a lower turnover as well. And Gallup reported that, you know, 51% of US employees would actually switch to a job that offers flex time, and they also in their studies found that women in particular, you know, I suppose including myself, I'm a mom, but I've always managed to work, and that's been with the help of organizations offering me flexible working over that period. So, you know, I suppose it's a way of saying, can we better align work schedules with the needs and the personalities of employees? So, you know, is it the right person fit? You know, we don't all want to work the same time. You know, like I like to start work early. I start work at 8 a.m. My sister starts work at 10 a.m. We both do our hours, but we start at different times. Her husband's a chef. He's home late at night, so she goes to bed a lot later than I do. So everything suits, but you know, she's just not a morning person, whereas I am. And so there might be ways that you can tweak in your organization, depending on obviously what's allowable, you know, and give schedule options greater emphasis even to the recruitment stage, so that you recruit the right people that the scheduling will work for them. And then you can also, you know, times change, you know, as in when I joined Softworks 12 years ago, you know, I had a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time. I now have one in university and one in going into junior cert or GCSE year. So, you know, they are different needs now than I did. So you might find if you survey employees that circumstances have changed, and some people that didn't want to work certain periods are now actually available to change their working hours. So it's worth just investigating it. And, you know, where possible, involve employees in the scheduling process. And again, I do understand that's not always possible. But, you know, according to Salesforce, they did a study, and employees who feel that their voice is heard are 4.6 times more likely to feel empowered to perform their best work. So they do want to be heard. So, you know, what is important to them? How far in advance do they want their schedules? Nobody wants a last minute schedule, do they? And what are their attitudes towards overtime? Some might hate it, some might love it. They might need the extra money. How do they want to receive their schedule? How flexible is the schedule? You know, could they swap a shift with somebody else if they wanted to? Some organizations allow it, some don't. And how are shifts assigned? And that's again back to the fairness. People want to know that they'll be treated fairly. So when scheduling, what do employees want? They want you to take into account their preferences. They want the fairness again, so the less desired schedules are balanced and fair. The flexibility to easily change their shift should that happen. And they want schedules that are smartly generated. So, you know, taking into account demand and supply, you know, who's available to work. And if suddenly somebody calls in sick, you know, will that gap be filled quickly? You know, they don't want to be left hanging there without having the support. And they want the tools and innovation that allows them to organize their work easily. So I'm going to pass you over to Killian now, who's going to talk a bit about how scheduling technology can assist. So, you know, you can set out all the process and everything on paper, but, you know, if you've got a very large organization and you're trying to implement it, you probably need a little bit of help. So I'll pass you to Killian, and thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Mairead. I can tell even listening to you there, this is a topic that you're very interested, very knowledgeable on. So my topic's going to be a little bit more, I suppose, focused on that technology side. So where I really get to enjoy this is I work with customers across all industries with different challenges. You've touched on them, some of them there, Mairead, where you might have night shifts in some areas, you might not in other areas. And I think one really important focus of this is looking at how technology can help. And from what you've said, I think it's pretty clear. Technology alone can't solve it. There's multiple factors that are involved, but it can definitely help, and it can definitely give employees that level of control when you actually work through, say, scheduling in this example. I think when we kind of sit down with clients, we tend to look through things like how fair is your scheduling? Is it equitable? Do you want to work towards that? Is that a major challenge for you? It could be things like flexible working that I'm going to look at here. And flexible working, I've seen, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations. And even some of the people here with us today who I've worked with, I know flexible working for them was different. For us, it was the ability to work from home occasionally. Others, it might be giving employees that little bit more control as they work through it. I think we've really moved towards a workforce of employees expecting to have engagement with a system, and they need it to be easy. So I'm just going to look at how a system like Softworks might be able to help with that. And then the whole factors around absenteeism. Historically, absenteeism used to be reported on once a month, and I think it's moved on a lot from that. It's a lot more about proactive engagement, proactive notifications, I suppose early interventions to see why somebody's been absent so many times, stepping in to see is there anything you can help with, adjustments to work schedules that might fit their work-life balance in that way a little bit better. I think one of the main things that I see when it's sitting down starting to do a schedule is what we always try to review is how do you schedule at the moment. We work with organizations who have a lot of fixed patterns where it's rotating patterns. Scheduling is more about annual leave management, vacation management, and so forth. Others are starting with a blank page. With them, we often see it's about making sure that your schedule, when you go to do it, is equitable and fair. And it's not just that a manager has done the best they can, it's that an automated program has been able to go through the scenarios, take into account preferences, availability, same number of nights, same number of weekends over a rolling period at any point in time, and make sure that it's considered fair across the organization. The other one is, if you're ever asked about it, it's been transparent on it. So it's showing employees. One of the things we've moved a lot towards is being able to show employees what sort of shifts they've worked over any period of time. There can be a felt sense that you might have more night shifts, or you might have more mornings, or maybe you're flexibly able to kind of start that a little bit earlier or later. And it's giving that sort of confidence to employees to be able to work through it in a really easy way is an important point. I always think with this, a good scheduling and workforce management system like Softworks is able to help with this. It's able to build in these processes, able to automate as much as possible. And it's not even just in your organization. It's allowing administrators to implement and configure policies, but also personally, sites I've worked with, it's going further than that. It's going locally in your organization. You might have different needs across certain individuals, across certain departments, across certain teams who have different makeups and different requirements as to what is needed at any point in time. I think with that, from Softworks side, one of the key things is making it easy. We've approached it with organizations whereby they have a lot of those fixed patterns and they've had those blank pages where they start scheduling. And we've tried to really, I suppose, work on a mindset of those two organizations have very different needs, very different requirements, very different challenges. When it's organizations who have rotating patterns, it's often going to be, if somebody's absent, make it clear, make it easy, make sure that shift is filled, give employees the control to be able to see that through technology like mobile apps, browsers. They just log in, they see a really, really visual screen to actually control that. Where we tend to help these organizations a lot is more around the kind of flexible working side that I'm going to touch on in just a moment. Other organizations where we kind of sit down and start reviewing their scheduling, they're actually starting each month with effectively a blank page. And they're sitting down and trying to cover off all of those topics that Mairead has just talked through. So things like, how fair is this? Have I taken into account Killian doesn't work so many Sunday nights because it doesn't suit his schedule, or Mairead mentioned her kids, that it suits that. So it's trying to sit down with a blank piece of paper and actually work through this. And I think one of the challenges I've seen is managers want to do the best they can by employees. They want to facilitate as much as possible. They want to kind of take into account those preferences, but it's the ability to actually get time to sit down, to document those, to work through it. And obviously there's going to be human error that occurs with that. We've seen a lot of organizations move towards a very, very automated scheduling system on the basis of this. And what does that mean? It's when you sit down with your blank schedule at the start of the month and you're looking at all these staff, and you want to go through all these scenarios and you want to build out all this logic, but it takes time and you don't have so much time to actually do this. So by building logic into technology systems like Softworks, you can actually go in and say, I want the person who has the correct skills. I want the person who has the correct hours available. I want to take into account fair shift distribution. I want that transparent. I want it reportable. I want employees to be able to see that they're working the same amount of weekends and nights. And effectively, I want to come out with the perfect roster. Softworks e-rostering is very much designed around that. It's allowing you to take into, I suppose, account local arrangements in each area, occasionally personal arrangements where a certain circumstance occurs that you need their roster to be a little bit different, and completely automate that with a click of a button. So it's taken away that time that managers are actually sitting down, time lost to the organization, and just building that into a completely automated program to give control. The next point I was just going to touch on then was flexible working. And again, I've got to work with organizations where flexible working means, as Mairead said, in Softworks, we get some element of flexi time. So we can start a little bit earlier or later, but that's often not possible. So flexible working I've seen mean working from home occasionally across some teams, but also giving employees the ability to go in and put in their preferences, their availability, their requests for certain days off. When you're on that sort of variable roster and you want to start a month with a blank page, if Killian can't work the 29th, he'd like to be able to put his hand up and say that so that he can plan that sort of work-life balance. And it gives him more control and I suppose understanding of the challenges that are needed in the roster. Now, this obviously has to be finely balanced with the needs of the organization. And that's often the difficult juggle. It's how many preferences can we take into account while still delivering our perfect service in whatever it is we do. And that juggle can become really difficult when you're sitting down doing that in a very manual way. So again, automating as much as possible around that is really key. And we've seen with flexible working things like reduction in stress and absences, where people have a certain need, they can work that different shift, they can swap a shift with their colleague and pick up one back for them. They can work from home on a certain day, depending on kind of how your individual system was set up. And I think that's a really important thing with the solution. It's that it's not one size fits all. It's kind of a consultancy process to understand, what do you need? What are your challenges? A big one we see nowadays is actually recruitment of staff and then retention, obviously, that sits behind that. But there's not enough staff in the workforce to actually fill all the vacancies. So the ones that we have, how can we best look after and also try deliver that perfect service as well with it? And that can occasionally be things like job sharing, flexible working across all areas. From the employee side, again, we've definitely seen a shift in employees over the past number of years where they expect things to be really quick, they expect things to be really easy, and they want to do it in different ways. So I know personally, when I use our software system, I always use the app because usually I'm walking around and I want to check how many holidays do I have and request leave and have it approved straight away. I know one of my team, he always does it through the browser because it suits him and he likes to kind of sit down at the computer. But it's given employees the ability to kind of have control within reason over their work-life balance. This is an area that we're kind of constantly innovating. Our most recent kind of big change on this was around the whole survey element. When you get into things like the engagement and experience of an employee, actually being able to ask them how they're finding things is really powerful, but it's also a little bit difficult to do in that way where you mightn't be there in the office at the same hours they are, they're working nights, you're working from home, things can change. So building in individual little surveys into an application where an employee can log in, they can quickly see a questionnaire, and it can be something really simple like, how are you finding things? How is your work-life balance? And then looking at your organization to see if there's individual areas, departments that you actually need to sit down and review to work on that sort of retention and making sure that you keep the really good staff that you have. The last area that I kind of touch on before I kind of pass it back towards Mairead is just the absenteeism element and managing and reducing that. So I suppose from a perspective of managing it, it's always been great to kind of sit down and get your reports on what's our absence percentage across the organization for the last month. But I think a lot of organizations have moved on from that. It's now become a lot more proactive, flagging that somebody is meeting a certain criteria, somebody is maybe consistently absent on a certain day with a certain trend, somebody has something occurring outside of work that's affecting their work, or they've become that little bit disengaged that Mairead was speaking about with it too. We've spent a huge amount of time trying to focus on getting these early interventions on. And I've seen a shift towards things like when I started in Softworks, everyone looked at, again, our absence percentage. Now it's trying to target that you have a certain amount of people off on vacation at any point in time or holidays at any point in time to make sure that you're kind of fairly distributing that leave. Everyone's getting the correct entitlement and the workload is not massively shifting in those periods for people to be put under undue pressure. Where you do kind of have those triggers of, I suppose, reoccurring absences, we've tried to be very proactive in sending engagement alerts to say, hi Mairead, something's going on with one of your team. You need to be aware of this. Or in this example, this employee has had 3 unplanned absence in the past month. Please ensure a meeting is scheduled. So it's not always a negative thing. It's often a positive thing to sit down with that employee and say, okay, it's consistently on a Friday evening. Is something happening, or Thursday is something happening that we need to be aware of? And then we can look to actually amend that schedule across that given day. I think from Softworks' point of view, it's trying to join all these different dots together and bring it all together for that sort of easy approach, quick, efficient way for a manager to sit down and get all this information while doing their day job, while being extremely busy with other tasks that they have at any point in time as well. And then I might just pass to Mairead, who does a quick summary, and I'll have a quick look at the questions while Mairead does this. So if you have any kind of questions on this topic, I don't claim to be, but Mairead's a real expert on it. So feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll pick a few out here at the end.
Okay, yeah, so thanks, Killian, for that. So, you know, I suppose that there's just some certain questions maybe to ask yourself, you know, when you leave here today, if you do want to try and increase engagement through your scheduling processes, is, you know, maybe does your scheduling ensure fairness and equity? You can say yes to this, brilliant. Do your scheduling procedures take into account your employees' well-being? Could you give employees more control over their schedules? You know, is it possible to change? I think, you know, one of the positive things that came out of the pandemic is that a lot of companies are way more open to more control over schedules and more flexible working, whether that is remote or different hours, etc. Are you able to adjust schedules in real time? So that's really important, that, you know, if workers aren't left, you know, with the wrong number of people, that, you know, or else even for the business, that, you know, you have an oversupply when you don't need it, depending on demand. And then, you know, finally, look, could you better balance the needs of both your employees and your business? Because that will certainly increase your employee engagement rates. And then just, I suppose, the summary of what we've gone through today. Look, there's no doubting that the importance of employee engagement, it just can't be overstated. And we can see it as if there are opportunities for organizations if they can master the art of employee engagement. And engaged employees are at the heart of every successful business. We saw that with a number of stats that came through. There's huge room for improvement. You know, as we look at Europe here at only 14% of employees engaged, and, you know, Ireland 11, the UK 9, and, you know, there's a lot of work that could be done there. You compare that to the US at 33%. So look, it should be a top priority, and it's obviously doable because some people are managing it much better than others. And scheduling, look, it's an opportunity to actually increase employee engagement, and then scheduling technology can assist you in that journey. As we you know, we're not in any way stating that you know, it can make it happen, but it can certainly assist you in that journey of doing it properly. I love this quote from Douglas Conant, who was the former CEO of Campbell's Soup, when he says, "To win in the marketplace, you must first win in the workplace." And I think that rings true for most places. So now we've a little bit of time left for questions and feedback. So, and look, if we run out of time, we will answer anything afterwards if we don't have enough time. So, Killian, were there any questions in there so far?
Yeah, there's a lot, Mairead. I think we need more than the couple of minutes. I'm just gonna, and I appreciate we only have about a minute and a half or so left. So, there's one here that I thought was good that you might be able to help, which is how can we measure engagement across our organization?
Okay, there's a number of ways. So I suppose, first of all, there's probably a lot of information you already have there that will give you an idea of whether you have good engagement or not. Killian talked there about absenteeism rates, so it's definitely worth looking at that. It's worth looking at the well-being of your employees as well. What else could you be looking at? So the productivity in your organization. So there's a few things, as I say, like you'll already have stats. And then what you want to do, I suppose, is survey your employees. So, you know, find out how they're doing, whether they're satisfaction surveys, opportunity, do they feel there's room to grow with the company? You could ask them alignment type questions. So, you know, do they feel that they you know, that their feedback is heard, you know, that if they have new ideas or initiatives, how receptive is the company? Another good way would be employee net promoter scores. So asking your employees, how likely would you recommend Softworks or whatever your company is to a friend or colleague, because that you'll get an idea of how employees can help you with recruitment, for example. And then look, obviously every manager, you should be having your one-on-one meetings, you should be having your group meetings, your department meetings. You do focus groups as well, and that come in because of, people maybe won't want to answer directly, so it can be more anonymous. And then, when employees leave, you should be doing exit surveys as well. I think so. Look, there's a number of different ways, and different things will work for different organizations.
Thanks, Mairead. There's a good few more, but the next one I was going to pick out here, and I'll probably take this one, Mairead. It's we're thinking of implementing a new system for scheduling. Is there anything we should be aware of? The first thing I'd say is definitely contact us. We'd be happy to chat with you. The next point I'd say is, one of my team always tells a really interesting story whenever he's with clients, and it's he sat down with two organizations, same industry, directly across the road from each other, who had an understanding that they wanted the exact same system. But when we actually got into the detail, their culture was different, their setup, their kind of requirements varied quite a bit. So I always think with these things, it's about firstly understanding, I suppose, what it is you're looking to achieve. So having kind of a clear vision in what is perfect for us in that way. It's also understanding that there's companies like Softworks who specialize in this. We do this day in, day out. You're not expected to kind of know all the answers when it comes to sitting down, defining this. And it's one of the things that we place a really big focus on is, I think, the consultancy side that comes along with this. It's conversing with you, it's trying to define your objectives, it's trying to help you through this. Even when you get into things like communication plans going out to staff, like bringing, as you've seen there, bringing staff along on this journey is really important, and getting them to download the app and buy into it is driven by things like, I suppose, engagement with that. And we've worked with clients lately where we've had posters up on walls, just letting them know that a new solution was coming in. So I'd say the key thing I'd say if you're looking to implement a new solution is make sure that you're kind of talking with people who are very knowledgeable in this space and are able to help. And I think you'll be provided correct guidance, and also contact Softworks.
Never miss an opportunity, hey, Killian?
Right, we are time. There's one more here that I thought was good, and it was just the last question, which is just whose job is engagement, and so whose job is employee engagement in an organization. I'll leave that with you.
That's an interesting one, because you will find sometimes that whose job is employee engagement, that must be a HR thing, that's nothing to do with me, and that's absolutely wrong. Employee engagement is everyone's job. I would say it should start with the top, start with your CEO, your managing director, whatever it is, moving down through to the leadership team, to the line managers, all the way down, then across departments. Employee engagement certainly comes into my marketing department, being able to feed messages to employees, all of that sort of thing. Yes, HR absolutely as well, but also IT in terms of the tools and technology. So look, it's everyone's job to help with that, and then it's the employees themselves as well. There has to be some level of I actually am receptive to this company. If they're totally negative, from day one, that's not going to work. You're not going to engage them. So I suppose the important thing to do is that that everybody is involved. It's a company-wide thing when it comes to employee engagement, and not just to think, oh, that's HR, it's nothing to do with me. That's what I would say on that one.
Mairead, we're a couple of minutes over. There are other questions. I've jotted down a few as we were going through this, but I think from our side, I suppose, thanks a million to everyone for your time today. Myself and Mairead's details are here on screen. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions that we don't get to here, but we will note these down and come back to yourselves individually. As kind of Mairead touched on throughout this, I think it's pretty clear this is, I suppose, a subject that affects every organization in every way across every area. And I hope you found some of the kind of information shared today really insightful and was useful to your organization. Thanks a million to everyone for joining, and we'll hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you very much.